Most developers are using AI agents to write code, but how do we know if the code they produce is any good? Research shows that AI-generated code has significantly more bugs, more security issues, and more logical errors than human-written code. So if you're shipping AI code without a review process, you're taking a huge risk. When it comes to AI code review, the landscape is pretty confusing. There are so many different tools and options available to us as developers. It can be hard to know where to start. So in this video, we're going to walk through the 4 levels of AI code review, and by the end of the video, you'll know how to write high-quality code with AI agents. So let's get into it. I just want to start with the problem statement before we look at any specific code examples. And the problem is that bad code in production is really expensive. As an extreme example, Amazon loses around $13 million for every hour of downtime, and typically downtime is caused by some kind of code change. So obviously, code review is one way we can mitigate this problem. The idea is that one developer will write code, someone else will take a look at that code, so a second pair of eyes will look for potential problems with the code. Often, code review results in higher quality code. We find issues. It leads to a discussion about the right way to implement something, and generally everyone is better off by having a code review process. So when you think about code review, there are 2 things to consider. The first one is AI. AI can spot things that humans miss. So you definitely want some kind of AI agent in your code review process. I found that AI agents can drastically improve the quality of your code because they will just spot issues that you won't see yourself. They don't sleep. They can scale to any volume. They can scan hundreds of files very, very quickly and find issues that you would miss. But equally, humans can catch things that AI agents will miss as well. So you want both things in the mix. Humans have a lot more context about the business and about the outside world than AI agents do. So you definitely want some level of human review, especially if you've got a difficult change. But as we scale with AI agents, we want to rely more and more on the automated element of the process, so that ideally humans are reviewing very, very minimal changes or only reviewing things when they really need to. So I think about 4 layers when it comes to AI code review. The first layer is automating the obvious things. So it's not uncommon for software teams to argue about formatting or type checking or code standards and things like that. So you want to have some kind of automation in place that deals with all of that stuff straight away. The way you can do that now with AI agents is to use automated hooks. They will run deterministic code to check your types, to check linting, to check your code formatting, to run your tests, and even to do security scanning as well. You want to have that automated from the get-go because that will drastically improve the quality of your code. What happens is that the hooks are triggered and then the output is fed back into an agent who can then self-correct. Layer 2 is to review the code locally. This is basically just using an AI agent to review the output. So there are all kinds of options here, but the general idea is you use some kind of AI agent to review your code. The third layer is having some kind of automated check. For example, on GitHub, you could have an automated process that scans the pull request as soon as it's opened, looks for problems. So before a human even looks at the code, some kind of additional automated check has happened. This is like a safety net because often people get tired. I do as well. So I often forget to run a code review process. So having something on your GitHub environment, for example, is very, very valuable. And then the final layer is obviously a human review. By the time you get to layer 4, a lot of the issues should have already been caught within layer 1, 2, and 3. So let's start with automating the obvious. So this is basically using deterministic hooks within your AI agents to run basic checks. So we can set up checks within Claude Code to verify. We can do type checking, linting, all of that good stuff. So I'll quickly show you how that works. So here's an example of the kind of thing you can do with deterministic hooks at this layer. Basically, when Claude Code finishes doing its work, you can run a script via a hook. And so in this example, I'm working on a Ruby on Rails project. And what I've got here is a Ruby code linter, which runs at the end of the agent run. I've also got a security scanner that you can run as well. So these are basically catching fundamental errors in the code. And the way you wire this up is you can set up a hook within Claude or your coding agent. So what happens is when the coding agent has finished working, it will just basically run this script. And you can actually run this by hand to kind of see what this looks like. So just to show you this in action, we can actually go ahead and just run the script. So this is basically what Claude Code does after it's finished doing its work. And I actually added a typo into the code base. So you should be able to see that this will fail with an error. You can see here an error where the controller has basically just like a rogue statement. So the syntax is invalid, but this will be caught then by your coding agent. And so anytime you have some kind of formatting issue or linting issue or type error, you can use your language specific tools to catch those issues early on. Okay, so layer 2 is where the fun happens. This is where we're going to use our AI agents to review our code. But before you do that, just two things to think about. It's surprising how many times people push code to review, but they haven't run the code locally. This is just one of my bugbears in general with development. It's always good to run the code locally. Don't just only rely on the tests. An example here would be if the UI is completely broken or the application doesn't even start up, for example, and the code has been pushed for review. It's really, really annoying. The other thing to kind of think about is just review the diff manually as well. Just kind of give it a glance over, look for any issues. But the really interesting thing now is to use an AI agent to review the output of another agent. So there are so many different ways to do this. There are a bunch of official plugins from Anthropic. I will show you in a second. I use a custom command because I can tailor it then to my specific needs. I started to use this idea of a review.md file. So the idea here is you have a markdown file in your repo, and so you do a general code review, but then also you can have some kind of special process. So if you've got some specific things that you want to look at within your project, you can put those specific things in this review.md file, which is super useful. I like this idea. Codex from OpenAI is a great experience when it comes to code review. There is a built-in review command that you can run, and it's really, really good out of the box. I think they've done a great job here. Better than Claude Code, in my opinion. And then the other thing you can do is use a tool like CodeRabbit or some kind of external code review tool. This integrates well with Claude Code. So this is the documentation for installing CodeRabbit, which is the tool that I'm using at the moment. But it's really, really easy to set up. And as you can see here, you can basically install it as a CLI, and then it plugs into Claude Code. So all you need to do then is run this command inside Claude Code, and it will do a really deep code review. Here are a bunch of official Claude plugins. You've got the code review plugin here. And if you actually go and look into the source code, you can see what it's doing. I always like to remember that there's no magic here. This is just a prompt. And honestly, you could just say, look at the code and find errors. And you can say that to Claude and it will probably do a pretty good job. But this is obviously a more detailed prompt. What I don't like about some of these tools is that they're using like the Haiku agent. Stuff like that I really don't like. So I wanted to do my own. There's also a code simplifier as well that you can look at. So this one again, there were some things I didn't like about this. So for example, it's talking about using JavaScript modules. If you're not using JavaScript, this is kind of annoying. So there's a lot of assumptions built into some of these plugins I found. They weren't generic, and I didn't really like that. So the command I'm using myself is just a really simple prompt. It just says to go and spawn a subagent to review the code changes. We're reviewing the current staged changes. And we're also looking for this review file to look at any project-specific things we want to look at. And then we just evaluate against correctness. So does the code do what it's meant to do? Security, checking validation and things like that, not having secrets in our code. Simplicity, I think this is a really important thing to think about because AI-generated code might be quite verbose. It might work, but it might not be like optimal. I think this is always something worth checking. Could you simplify the code without losing functionality? Could you make it easier to understand? Could you make it like cleaner or simpler? AI agents will often find a way to improve the code. And then things like will it break under load, concurrency, race conditions, and stuff like that. And then what I like to do is group the findings. And this is a really important part when you're using AI agents to review code. They will often identify many, many things that you could fix potentially, but not all of those things need fixing. So you want to focus on what are the most important things to fix. So must fix are like critical issues, but then we often have minor things that are worth paying attention to, but maybe they don't block the pull request in general. So grouping them is a really, really good idea. All right, so let's spin up Claude Code and see if we can find some code review errors. So I'm going to ask Claude to add in an SQL vulnerability to see if we can catch it. Can you add in an SQL vulnerability? I'm testing out code review tools. So let's see if we can just go and add in some kind of vulnerability to kind of test. Okay, it looks like I added Okay, so I was testing this earlier, so we already have a vulnerability, so that's fine. So we can go ahead and run one of our code review tools now. So let's go ahead and run the, I have a bunch of different review tools. So I have my own, but there's also a bunch of built-in review tools here as well. So you can see we've got CodeRabbit. We've also got the official Anthropic plugin as well. So I'm going to run my own review command and see what we get. All right, so as you expect, the code review picked up the SQL injection vulnerability, which is great. There's another one that it picked up here. And then, yeah, there's just a bunch of other minor things like a race condition as well. So this code review did its job. It found a bunch of issues. So let's also just have a look at the CodeRabbit example as well, just to see if we can get a similar result. So we're going to run the CodeRabbit review command and see if we can also kind of find other things using this tool. All right, so we finished the code review with CodeRabbit, which is our external code review tool. It did find the SQL injection vulnerability, as you'd expect. It found some nullable things on a database schema. Yeah, so again, it did a pretty good job on the code review. Obviously, you can see the value of having something like this installed in your project because there are often so many issues. Almost every time I run a code review with AI-generated code, there's something it finds. So there's normally something to fix. Okay, so now that we've reviewed our code locally, when we push our code up to GitHub, we also want to have an additional check. So there's a couple of ways you can do that, but the one I'm using myself is to use Codex. I quite like this. OpenAI's Codex integrates well with GitHub. This is the page. There's really good instructions here on how to do this. And the idea here is that you can just say @Codex review within your code, and then Codex will go and do a review of your code. And you can also set this to automatically review. So anytime you push up a change, this should automatically run. And let me just show you an example of that in action. So you can see here, I've opened a change on GitHub. You can see here the file's changed. And if we go to the conversation, you can see here that Codex has flagged 3 issues for this change. Issue 1, issue 2, and then issue 3. So obviously these are things that you may not have caught locally. It's just like an extra layer of defense that you can have to catch potential issues. The other one that you could take a look at from Claude or Anthropic is this code review plugin. However, this is only available in research preview for teams and enterprise. This is also very, very expensive as well. So I think it's like $15 or $20 per code run. So this is too expensive for my own use cases, but this might be one you want to check out if you work in a big team. And then obviously the final layer to all of this is just to have some kind of human review. You always want to kind of have some eyes on your code, even if it's just to kind of give you a sense of what's going on. Like I said, humans often have more context than AI agents about the business or the product or whatever environment you're working in. And you want to kind of tailor this. So the more serious the change, if you're making a database migration change or an infrastructure change, you want more human review. But if you're just making a documentation update or a small bug fix, you can probably largely rely on some of the automated tooling, especially as we scale. But human review is always important. So my final takeaway is that there isn't a perfect tool. The most important thing is you have a process. I wouldn't worry too much personally about the particular prompt you're using or the plugin. Just remember that when you finish writing AI code, always be very suspicious, always assume there's a problem with the code, and get another agent to review the code. Even just doing that simple thing with just the most basic prompt, go and look at the code, see if you can find any errors. Just doing that alone will catch so many things. And then the other highest impact thing you can do is probably have something on your CI system. So have a automated code review built into GitHub. The value of doing that is really, really high. You set it up once, and then every single time you open a change, you get a free code review. That's a really, really valuable thing to do as well. I hope you found the video useful. If I've missed anything, let me know in the comments if you've got any suggestions for tools. I'll link all of the resources in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.